I've been listening to a lot of these doomer type videos. The titles are like, I'm 28, I've never had a girlfriend. I'm 31, I'm a failure. It's just guys talking about their lives over Modern Warfare 2 gameplay. I find these videos fascinating because I feel like I should have been that. There's a parallel universe where I'm making a video called I'm 29 and I've never held hands with a girl. I think back to when I was 16, I was smoking weed every day. I was a C student. I knew I wasn't going to go to college, which was blasphemy back then. I remember sitting in class in high school, my teacher asked who was going to go to college, and every single person raised their hand except me. I had goals, but I knew I wasn't going to go to college. And nobody really sat me down to talk to me honestly about what my options are and how I could succeed despite not wanting to go to college. It was always seen as kind of like a burnout failure move. So when I was 18 to 20 years old, I was a debt collector. My job was okay for the time, but I would look around in my office and I saw people that were 55 years old making $17 an hour, just like I was. And so I thought that I might be dead in the water. If you're a young guy and you see yourself in these failure YouTubers, you think that that might be your future, just know that you can take a different path. Even if you're addicted to video games like me, even if you're socially awkward, even if you're bad at school and you know that you would not make it in college, all of that describes me, and I was still able to find a path to having a wife, kids, and a house. And I have a pretty good career alongside that. Now, one thing that a lot of these guys have in common is that they just don't seem to care much about fostering relationships. They're isolated. I see a lot of guys making videos talking about how they just like to go to work, mind their business, and go home. They don't want to talk about their lives with their coworkers. They don't want to grab a beer. They just want to do their work and clock out. But you can miss a lot of opportunity if you approach life in this way. These types of guys like to think that if you succeed based on relationships, that somehow this is an inauthentic method of success. But that simply is not the case. Nobody wants to work with a weirdo. Imagine you asked your coworker, hey, what'd you do this weekend? And they were like, I don't want to talk about my personal life. You'd be like, okay. Like, if you're a supervisor, a manager, an owner, is that really the guy that you want to promote? Even if his work is really good. These people will sit here and they'll act like their way of life is just common sense, but it's antisocial, weird behavior. My job right now is I lead a maintenance department for a property management company. My team repairs the units and stuff like that. I work side by side with basically the director of operations, and most of my day is spent talking to her, strategizing about different projects. And this lady is basically the physical manifestation of property management. She comes in earlier than everybody. She works twice as many hours as everybody else. She sacrificed her personal life to hold this company together. And a lot of people who are at the highest levels of companies operate on that level. There's no way that you can ascend to positions where you work closely with these people if you're unpleasant to interact with, because they don't separate work interactions with personal interactions. Their life is their work. So 95% of the interactions are at work interactions. There's no way you can be in a leadership position with the attitude that some of these guys have. Now, I've been in a few different industries. I went from being a comedian at the age of 16 to being a debt collector to selling real estate to now I'm in property management. And every one of these jumps has been a major improvement, and each change was inspired by conversations with my coworkers. I met my wife through a coworker. And while I don't have a ton of friends, my 4 or 5 good friends that I do have were all my coworkers at some point. I know multiple people who I used to work with who, if I needed a few $1,000s to get out of a bind, they would give it to me and they wouldn't even ask for it back. Some of these people that I met in real estate, they make like hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. They'd be happy to help me out. Like, those are very powerful friends to have, and those are the type of people that can help you overcome tough situations that you might be in that you just simply wouldn't have the resources to handle on your own. For a long time, I never understood how people could be homeless, because if I lost my job, I could get a job working for one of my old jobs, or I could work for one of my friends to make a little bit of money. If they wouldn't help me and I lost my house because I couldn't pay my mortgage, well, I have family that I could live with. The people in my life simply would not allow me to sleep on the streets. I would not only have to make a lot of mistakes to become homeless, I would have to piss off a whole lot of people. Even if you don't have a lot of money in your bank accounts, you don't have 6 months of savings, you could have a different type of security blanket or security cushion, whatever, in the people that you know. One of the biggest improvements I've made in my life is overcoming my social awkwardness. And it's not that I'm no longer socially awkward. I misspeak all the time. I stumble my words. For me, there's nothing worse than when I'm hanging out with a friend, I'm in my element, I'm comfortable, and then their other friend who I don't know shows up, and then now I don't know how to act for some reason. I'm I'm just a weirdo sometimes. But I was able to overcome that by putting myself out there. I was getting some wins, and those wins build your confidence. They allow you to forgive yourself for the blunders much more easily. One of my biggest struggles growing up is like I would stay up super late at night, just laying in bed, reflecting on all the embarrassing stuff that I did that day. And I would spend a lot of time just dwelling on the mistakes that I made. But now that I'm 29 and I've, made a life for myself and I've overcome, I've kind of succeeded despite those awkward moments. Well, now it's a lot easier to have those moments and then just move forward and not dwell on it. I don't let those things define me like I did before I had that success. So you need to give yourself opportunities to have success and prove to yourself that you're able to do it, right? And even if you struggle talking to new people, you can still succeed in building relationships in the professional space because you can lead with your skill in whatever you're doing. And then once people see that you know what you're doing, they're going to keep you around in the company. Well, then you can build a personal relationship on that foundation. I notice that when I go to a new company or a new industry, I'm very dry. I'm very much about the task, right? And then I open up after a little while. And this is actually a good strategy because it allows me to feel people out before opening up. If you take the opposite approach and you come in just loud and you're outgoing, you're a funny guy, but you don't know who you're dealing with, well, it's easier to rub people the wrong way and kind of burn bridges right away. You got to learn your audience before you open up in that way to your coworkers. But usually you discover that people are cool. And even if you don't want to hang out with them outside of work, you don't want to go grab a beer with them, an at-work friend can change your life, even if it stays in the office. When I was a comedian, I wanted to figure out a way to make money out of high school. I didn't want to graduate high school and now I'm working at a pizza place. I felt like I'd be a loser if I did that. So I was asking one of these other comics what they did for work, and they said they were a debt collector. So he hooked me up with a job. Got me in for an interview. I got a job. Now I'm 18. I'm working in an office. And even though the job was miserable, I wasn't making that much money. For 18 years old, working in an office was a lot more respectable, in my opinion, than working at like Walmart or McDonald's or something like that. And then, over the years, I met some really cool people at the debt collection company. We all went out one day, and one of them brought their friend to the show that we were going to, and that would end up being my wife. And then later, one of my coworkers, just in passing in a conversation, told me that she thinks I'd be good at real estate, being a realtor. I'd never even thought of that before, but I started looking it up and researching it, and I decided that maybe I could do that, and I got my real estate license. I stopped being a debt collector. 2 years later, I was making over $100,000. I made $125,000 when I was 24 years old. And that just came out of nowhere. I never would have thought to do that if that person didn't think that I'd be good at it. And in real estate, I met some amazing, successful people. And I formed some solid friendships that are going to last a lifetime. And even if I don't see some of these people on a regular basis, I can imagine that there's going to be some opportunities that come up for me down the line because of those relationships that I made as a real estate agent. And after 4 or 5 years as a real estate agent, I decided that I was looking for a change because I knew I was having a kid, and I didn't think that I was going to be able to plan for the future in a proper way if I'm working on commission only. There was a lot of ups and downs. Even though, I was making some pretty decent money, even in the down years, I wanted something that I could kind of start to plan for like a year out to 2 years out that wasn't so unpredictable. And I was telling this to the guy that owned my office building that my team officed out of. And he was invested in me because he thought that, he liked the way that I work, and we would talk from time to time. And because I took the time to explain this stuff to him and open up to him about my personal life, he suggested that I get into property management. And so I looked into that and I decided that that might be something that I can do. And so, not even 2 years ago now, I decided to get into property management, and I have made a great career for myself so far in just a short amount of time. The point is that I never would have made any of these moves if I was just clocking in, keeping to myself, and clocking out. As much as people would love to get by and climb up the ladder just based on your merit and your work alone, you just can't isolate yourself and expect to get what you want in life. If you want people to cooperate with you, if you want people to buy from you, support your business, then you have to be the guy that they want to help.